IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Lightning Platform by Salesforce. The Lightning Platform is a leading cloud platform that makes building AI-powered apps faster and easier. With Salesforce, now everyone is empowered to build apps for their organization. Learn more at salesforce.com/buildapps.
Welcome to IT Visionaries. Today's guest is Jamie Smith, Chief of Information of the University of Phoenix. For over 40 years, the University of Phoenix has been the pioneer of online education, graduating over 1 million students since its inception. Today, the university continues to focus on meeting the needs of adult learners and championing their success, with context-driven academia and a learn-at-your-own-pace curriculum. But it's not all academics that has helped University of Phoenix rise to the top. You need top talent and resources, especially on the IT side, to get the job done. For Jamie Smith, he says recruiting and retaining talent is always priority to the school's success. He shared with us some of the things the school does to keep their people engaged and excited about their work.
So I can take no credit for the first one because the first we did a Campfire. And so a Campfire is where some of the Salesforce folks will come in and basically run a one-day hackathon for us. So the first week I got there, we had one of those. And so taking people out of different business departments, and it's almost like a Shark Tank where they form around different ideas. And within that day, they're both going to learn a little bit about Salesforce as well as develop something. And at the end of the day, the winning team had actually developed a disability services application that used to be on this old ticketing system, kind of buried in the corner, moved it over to Salesforce, where not only we got to sunset an app as IT, which was great because that thing was terrible to support, but we got to serve the students with disabilities that much better. It was so much more frictionless. It required 4 phone calls before. Now they can submit it online. Their academic counselor can see it. So it was a huge success story. And then out of that, several other things that were worked on that day ultimately went to production in a day. Yeah. Now it took a little bit of hardening time after and building out the workflows, but it was kind of like getting those Old West, those movie sets that you'd see where it was just the fronts of the buildings. They had most of that there. You couldn't go into the saloon and get a drink yet, but most of that stuff of what it was going to look like was there. And then it took a couple of weeks just to kind of work through because this was our first one too. And then other ideas that were worked on kind of progressed and went to production. So I think one, that type of event has a halo around it, because people come back, and these are people that don't always work together either. And so they've made new connections even inside the business. They talk about what they did. And then, the other piece that made it go viral was it's like, oh, we're actually getting more done now. This thing that I'd had on my backlog for 5 years and it never rose to this thing to be big enough to be a project, actually made it into production. And so, and everybody has a list of great ideas that they want to implement. And so seeing that things were actually getting done was that true next step. The war for talent is going to be an ongoing challenge, one of the biggest challenges for CIOs and really digital companies, period, to win. And so for us, there's 2 different options you can have. You can either try to take a bigger slice of the pie, or you can try to make the overall pie bigger. I think what this does is makes the overall pie bigger. It's not just for, we talked about kind of citizen developers pathways out of the business and into technology, but it's even making our own development staff much more kind of multi-tool players, if you will, because a lot of us are very deep, like, oh, he's a Java developer or she's only a DBA, right? But we need to be both kind of wide in a lot of things and deep so that we can work on whatever's most important for the university that day. And so you can't do that if you only have 3 Salesforce people or whatever. And so not only kind of being able to bring more people into the IT developer pool, but also make the developers you have much more universal and kind of skilled has helped us be able to move work around and get more done. And that's really the vision of the future for IT. On the recruiting side, we have to be the employer of choice, at least in our area, right? It's kind of like that in-state school wanting to keep all the recruits in-state when you're thinking about kind of a football analogy. But we can only do that by being the best work environment. And that's not about having foosball tables and free cereal and all that stuff is great. It's about kind of finding smart people and giving them hard problems to solve and the environment and the freedom to do it. If you can do that, that also goes viral externally as well. Yeah, it activates that. It's there, but it's latent. And especially University of Phoenix, I mean, we were the pioneer of the online university, right? And pioneered University for Working Adults in 1978. So it's in our DNA. But sometimes when you become a bigger company, it goes dormant, right? That whole notion of, being able to truly leverage that creativity, it's back to another Amazon reference, you become a day two company very quickly versus a day one company, which is, ruthlessly focused on the student and the customer success. And so this kind of helps reawaken that and at a very grassroots level. So that if somebody has a good idea, they also say, oh, there might be a pathway to get this into the world.
With the growing number of apps and having to manage their life cycles, Jamie emphasizes the need for governance, especially within a growing IT department.
So I think two things. One, on the governance, we need to be very careful not to put too much governance on it. So just enough. There are two really, really critical points in the governance piece. One is a little bit of the danger when you kind of train a lot of people in Salesforce. Salesforce kind of becomes like their hammer and everything else looks like a nail, right? It might not be right for every problem. We may not want to put, our core accounting system in Salesforce and somebody's thinking about building that. We already have one of those. And so you kind of have to draw your Venn diagram, if you will, of the circles. And where we can kind of help up front is, where should this go? Is this a good fit? Does it already exist, right? Because you don't want to reinvent the wheel either. So a little bit of guidance up front. And then a little bit of guidance just to make sure at the end it's hardened, it's not a security risk, you're not using SSN when you shouldn't be, and some of those things are really important from a governance. The rest of it's just making sure stuff is visible. So every one of these is at least a user story in our Jira, which is where we manage our work tickets, and just making sure that there's a shared visibility so that you just don't feel like you've let the genie out of the bottle and all of a sudden you're never going to be able to control it. I think the second thing you mentioned, which is really around managing the life cycle of these applications. So we as IT folks are always aware that, and especially now, the applications we're building today kind of have the half-life of a goldfish, not like a tortoise, right, anymore. And so we know that what we're building is tomorrow's legacy system, and then we're eventually going to have to shut it down. Citizen developers may not come in with that. So they're going to get really attached to whatever that we build. So starting them out up front, understanding that this is going to have a life cycle. At some point, we're going to have to prune it and move it, whatever, is really, really important just to set the stage so they don't get quite as emotionally attached.
While citizen development is a future trend many of our guests have talked about on this season of IT Visionaries, Jamie shares that developers are raising concern with citizen development and the building of apps.
That's the positive spin on it, right? Is that, you're going to move on to the next interesting problem. I think the other thing that's really important to set up front is the developers always get really worried that this is going to create a whole new list of bugs that I have to fix, right? And so as a citizen developer, just like our development teams, it's like you support what you built. So making sure that they understand that this is a commitment a little bit to this and that it's somebody else isn't going to fix the problems and kind of using that teamwork to go through it is really important too, because that helps quell the developer's fear that like my entire backlog is now going to be taken up with citizen developer bugs and all those things.
So how can organizations reduce concerns about increased involvement with citizen development?
So it varies a lot by the department and their readiness. So we started very intentionally with what's called a business operations group. They're kind of 1 degree away from being a developer anyway. They're already in Salesforce. They might be the admin. They might be that super user. So starting in that, it doesn't look like such a dramatic shift. If I was just pulling, people out of finance that are, no, I can't close the books because I got to fix these bugs in this other system, that's a much bigger lift. So we've intentionally started there. I think as the wins are much more visible across, the other leaders are going to want to say, hey, boy, I have a big backlog too. Why can I, let's get some of that. So I think that's really important, is starting, kind of that 3-foot putt, if you will. Maybe fear is too strong, but we're having to transform. It's like the change management aspect of it from a people perspective. And so now many more people are going to kind of see behind the curtain, understand development, which is a great thing, but it's only going to increase they're going to have more ideas and more backlog. So it just kind of creates the fact that the flywheel has to spin faster, and it makes you realize that we're never going to be fast enough. This is a lot faster and it's great. We're still not fast enough. And so we have to be a little bit more ruthless on throwing out the 100 bad ideas for the one great one, or the good ideas too, right? There's a lot in that pile that are probably really good things that somebody would want, but what's the 1 or 2 things we can focus on? So this has the opportunity to kind of diffuse that focus a little bit because we can do more.
IT is a field where things are moving at a lightning pace, but the future is bright. And as we have done with all of our guests, we asked Jamie his take on the future of IT and what he sees as some trends and things to look out for.
Yeah, I think the vision is using kind of Salesforce becomes that strategic platform for us. And you think about it's kind of the hub that we build everything around. And once we have that, once we're a little closer to kind of having that full platform vision, these are really those pluggable components on top of it. I think the other thing that'll happen is, and this happened a little bit in kind of my previous transformation that we went through on this space too, at some point it's going to be a lot harder to tell who's an IT person and who's a business person, and I think that's awesome. So I would walk around the floor and see the teams developing stuff, and I'm like, oh wait, that person works in marketing, but they're in there, slinging some code and building a feature and doing all this stuff. And the teams get so energized when they're kind of truly empowered, self-organizing teams like that, and they have this new skill set. It's, I think that's going to be the really most interesting part, is the human aspect of this.
Thanks for listening to this episode of IT Visionaries. We look forward to having you with us again.
Thank you again to our friends at Salesforce. IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Lightning Platform by Salesforce, a leading cloud platform that makes building AI-powered apps faster and easier. With Salesforce, now everyone can build apps for their organization. Learn more at salesforce.com/buildapps.